We have been in this solemn liminal space of Lent for the last 3 Sundays, but this Sunday is a little bit different. The 4th Sunday of Lent is called Laetare Sunday, and Laetare is Latin for rejoice. So although we're still working through a time of earnest self-reflection, today the mood of our reflection is somewhat lighter. There is a little bit of difference in the sanctuary this morning. If you hadn't noticed, there's some color that has not been here the last few weeks. We have the purple out on the pulpit and the lectern. We have some banners hanging up this morning in what has been a very bare sanctuary. And all of this lends credence to the fact that the starkness of Lent has sort of eased on this Sunday, simply because the hope of Easter is drawing very near to us. And our scripture lesson today reflects this coming hope into our presence. I was online this week looking for a picture to put on the cover of the bulletin, something to do with sheep, since our gospel reading was about sheep this morning, and since the story we heard from the gospel was about a sheep who was found, I went searching for a picture of a found sheep. That's what I Googled. I Googled found sheep, and the first thing that popped up to me was this wonderful story I want to share with you. I think it must have been on the 12th of March, anyway, the first part of this month, this year. A hiker in the Australian mountain found a lost sheep. The sheep had apparently escaped from a farm when it was just a tiny lamb, and this poor being was in great peril. You see, selective breeding for wool has really altered the lives of sheep that are kept for commercial purposes. They need now to be sheared at least once a year, But this sheep that was found on Mount Alexander in Australia had not been sheared for at least 6 years. 6 years. Its body had grown very fragile under the heavy burden of over 88 pounds of fleece. Fleece that was infested with beetles and maggots. It was full of leaves and twigs and bark and sticks. It was urine soaked, and it was matted from being exposed to the elements all these 6 years. The sheep was unable to stand, so it was unable to graze, and it was very near death when this hiker found him. Out of the decency and the goodness of this hiker's heart, an animal sanctuary was contacted, Edgar's Mission Farm Sanctuary. The people of the sanctuary responded with tremendous care. They rushed to the sheep. They cleared away the overgrowth from its face so that they could feed it and give it water, because at that point it was too weak even to be moved. They gave it fluids through an IV, and then they were able to gently lift it and carry it into a van and take it to the sanctuary, where it was immediately sheared in a process that took 4 hours. 4 hours to remove that 88 pounds of fleece. That lost sheep is now a found sheep. He's been named Alex after the mountain he was discovered on, not by a shepherd, but by a kind-hearted hiker who recognized the sanctity of the sheep's life. Alex is recovering very nicely now at Edgar's Mission Sanctuary, where he will live out the rest of his days very well cared for. And just like the rejoicing that happens in Luke's story when the sheep is found, there has been a great deal of rejoicing and news media coverage about Alex's rescue as well. Luke chapter 15 is full of this kind of rejoicing. The chapter opens with the story of the lost sheep that Stacy read for us a little bit ago. And then there is a short parable about a woman who lost one of her 10 very precious coins. And finally, the chapter concludes with the parable of 2 lost sons, the prodigal or the wasteful son and his hard-hearted older brother. But all of those stories about things lost conclude with those things being recovered. The sheep and the coins and the brothers are all found, which is cause for wonderful celebration. And the gift that these narratives talk about, the gift of being found, is a promise for all of us. When we talk about people being lost, there is confusion in that sentiment. Theologically, when we sometimes are mistakenly thinking that a lost person is lost to God. But it would be more accurate to say that this person is lost to himself or lost to herself. We can be so far removed from the image in which we were created. We can distance ourselves so far from the origins of our holy God that we lose ourselves. We lose sight of our loving purpose in the world. We lose sight of God, the God who formed us for relationship with God and with other people. If a person is lost, it's not because God can't locate that person. It is because that person can't locate himself in God. God is already and always with us wherever we might wander off to. Wherever we might lose ourselves, God is the constant present for us and with us. God is always calling out to us and calling us home. The former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, said it this way: "It's not that I have a long journey to undertake in order to get to God, but I have a long journey to my own reality. Pilgrimage is always a traveling to who I am. God is not merely on God's way to us. God's loving kindness is there ahead of us. God's loving kindness is there ahead of us." When we remember that God's loving kindness is there ahead of us, we're finally able to shear through the heavy, overwhelming fleece of our lives. We're able to work through the layers of luggage and the years of bondage that have held us aloft from holy presence. There's a video of Alex the sheep's rescue, and I have to admit I have watched it over and over and over again, and I will continue to watch it over and over again. And as I've watched it, I have thought about the suffering that this sheep endured because of his own will, a will that took him out of the sheepfold and away from his farm. It's a miraculous thing that a little lamb on his own could survive even one night. But to survive for 6 years, that's almost impossible, unthinkable. Sheep are easy targets to a number of predatory animals. Alex survived, though. He survived only to be encumbered and threatened by a weight that grew out of his own being. What almost killed him came from within him. It was a loving presence greater than Alex that finally rescued him from death and restored him to life. I think it's not a lot different for us as human beings. While we are certainly in danger from hard things in our world, it is ultimately what grows out of us that causes the greatest harm to us. Our resistance to knowing what lies within, our determination to turn away from the malice in our own spirit, the greed that we try to bury from our own awareness, the unforgiveness in our hearts, our judgmental and prejudiced attitudes, our fear and mistrust of each other, the violence that we give birth to, the hatred that we plant and grow. These things, left unsheared and unkept, become the heavy burdens that rob us of life. They are the paths we travel down that take us away from ourselves and get us lost far away from our nature in and with God. We too need a loving embrace greater than ourselves to rescue us from death and restore us to life. The repentant person is the person who knows her need for rescue and who seeks out and succumbs to the one who can save. The repentant person is the one who allows the work of transformation to take root in his heart or her heart, and then makes space for change to emerge from the inside out. And that transformation causes joy in heaven, Jesus says. There is great rejoicing in our foundness with God. This is a Sunday of rejoicing because we know that new life, our new life, is just over the horizon. But before we get there, we must first continue on this road to Golgotha. Part of finding ourselves in God includes our own death on the cross, the death of a will that stubbornly leads us astray, the death of our own prideful ego. This is why we pause during Lent. This is why we do this work of introspection, so we can seek what is false in us, so we can seek out our own lostness. But the rejoicing of this Sunday reminds us that what awaits for us on the other side of this liminal space of unknowing is hope. When we take the pilgrimage and endure this long inward journey, we are met by the God whose loving kindness is there ahead of us. After we are crucified, we are met by the hope of Easter and God who calls us to resurrection. We are met by the one who rejoices over us with singing when we finally find ourselves in the sanctuary of holy presence.